Welcome to The Blast Zone, the podcast where we dig up the bombs that shook Hollywood and try to find out why they went up in flames. This week, more like the way of the fun, this is the way of the gun. Welcome to The Blast Zone.
Welcome to The Blast Zone.
We are not a podcast about bad movies. We are a podcast about movies that did badly.
That's right.
I am Jon Drake, in-house film critic of my Letterboxd account.
And I'm Ian Dukes. I'm a person with thoughts and feelings, and some of them are about movies.
Movies like The Way of the Gun, which we'll be talking about today, unfortunately. But before we get into that, Ian, how are you doing this week?
You know, there's one thing they don't tell you. When you get older, you're always tired.
Yes.
You can never get untired. And now that I think about it, maybe they did tell me, but I was just too tired to hear it.
You said that, and I was immediately like daydreaming about my bed.
You're not hearing me either.
It's later in the day for me than it is for you. I could go to bed at any time now. Past 7 p.m., any time is a good bedtime.
If you can go to bed and fall asleep, that's also a blessing past a certain age.
Oh, tiredness and insomnia is a terrible combo.
Digestive issues, back pain, things can happen when you try to finally lay down in your bed and enjoy your few moments of rest. They don't always come easy.
I feel like that was a dig at me, the indigestion comment, because off mic, I've been burping up a storm because I had beef kebabs for dinner.
Ooh.
And they are not settling properly, let's say.
I hear that.
Ian was like, "Do you sure you don't want to go get some Tums or some Pepto?" And I said, "No, I'm not going to let you off the hook, Ian. You're going to have to listen to me."
My thoughts were of solidarity with you and concern for your comfort, and that is all.
Fine. Quick note about this week's intro. When I say the way of the fun, I meant recording this podcast with Ian would be fun, not the movie. Fuck this movie. I hate it.
Not a fun way to spend your evening, you could say.
I almost wanted a gun way to spend my evening,
Yikes.
if you know what I mean. But it's too soon to get into that because we haven't even talked about the other stuff we watched this week. So, Ian, I'm hearing this for the first time. Neither of us have shared what we'll be talking about tonight. So why don't you tell the listeners and me something you watched that you wanted to share?
Okay, this time I have to earnestly say this is not going to be fun, but it was something good.
Oh.
It's a new documentary called An American Bombing, brand new on HBO. It's about the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing. It's something that I lived through as a young person, and I remember it happening, but it wasn't until recently that I connected those events to the broader web of the history of American domestic terrorism. I wasn't super connected to the news at that young age, but I still feel like the media didn't do a great job of connecting the dots. For anyone who doesn't know, it really all connects literally and directly to the same kind of ideological radicals America is contending with today. And now you can't absolve the cops and the feds. They did some shady shit too, as they are known to do at places like Ruby Ridge and Waco. That didn't make anything better. But it's scary. You look around today, you know, watch a documentary like this and look at all the things they're pointing to. Gun nuts and sovereign nation people and white supremacists. It all feels bigger and worse than back then. So I guess the point is we shouldn't really feel safe, and we aren't. Many of our worst mass shootings in recent years have been explicitly linked to this same ideological heritage. It's a really educational doc if anyone's listening who's not aware of all those connections. And in any case, even if you are, it's incredibly moving. I was crying within the first 5 minutes because of the tragedy of this thing. And it's not something fun that you want to watch all the time, but it was well made, and it's a really intense and interesting documentary.
I was also very young when this happened, much younger than you.
Much younger.
So much younger. No, but I guess the reason it feels so much bigger now and worse could have something to do with like the 24-hour news cycle wasn't really in effect yet.
Sure.
The way information spreads through social media and the internet. And also, I just feel like America and the world feels bad lately.
Yeah, so there's no hopeful ending to this story, but I don't know. You feel maybe somewhat better equipped to face the world if you understand what's going on in it.
But, you know, long story short, fuck Tim McVeigh and everyone who aspires to be like him.
Yeah.
All right, thanks guys. That's it. We're just gonna call it.
I hope you watched something more fun than I did.
You're in luck because last Saturday I got dangerously high.
Wow.
And went to the theater for the first time in a while to see Godzilla and Kong.
Oh, neat.
I wanted to see Civil War, but I was with my buddy Steve and he was like, "I don't want to see that. Not when I'm this high. That seems too heavy." So I was like, "That's a good call." So we went to Godzilla and Kong, and it was completely ridiculous and silly. If you go back and watch the 2014 Godzilla, it does not feel connected to this current monster verse that we're living in. Godzilla's glowing bright pink because that was like the color of the power reactor he ate this time. Kong's got a big metal hand because he got frostbite. Like, it's just very silly, but it's a lot of fun. I've always enjoyed these movies. I do kind of miss the solemnness and the real attempt to say something that the 2014 Godzilla was going for, but I enjoy both types of movies. I just wish we got a little more of that. I think King of the Monsters was trying to be like that and it failed, so they just decided to go full gonzo.
Okay.
And really lean into the silliness. But some good news on that front. One of my favorite favorite big budget sci-fi filmmakers, Gareth Edwards, has been announced as the next director of a Jurassic movie.
Ooh, that's really interesting.
Starring Scarlett Johansson, apparently, is the plan. It's supposed to take place, if not during the original movie, at least in that same time period. So there won't be any Chris Pratts or Bryce Dallas Howards running around, sadly, for Bryce Dallas Howard, because that's Bay. But he seems, out of all of the filmmakers working today that do big budget sci-fi action, he seems like the one who can pull it out of this tailspin it's been in lately.
It sounds very promising. I look forward to seeing how he visualizes that world on screen. We like the other worlds he's put on screen.
Yeah, he's batting 1,000 in my book. Rogue One, The Creator, Monsters, the 2014 Godzilla are all films I really enjoy. So I'm looking forward to this one. But speaking of things I'm looking forward to putting The Way of the Gun in my rearview mirror and never having to think about it again. So did you know about this movie before I put it on the list?
I don't think so. I think that once again, as often happens to me on this show, I am a babe in the woods and I did not know about this movie until you clued me in.
It's a movie that I remember enjoying as a teenager, which makes a lot of sense when you watch this movie. It's a movie that I don't think I watched over and over again like some of the other ones I talked about loving as a kid, but I definitely would be like talking about it like, oh yeah, it's underground. Like probably don't know about it, but it's really cool. It's really violent.
Yeah, it seems like it was written by a teenager, so I get why a teenager would like it.
And it was in fact written by a 32-year-old Oscar winner.
Yeah, weird.
Chris McQuarrie.
Hard to explain.
Yeah, this movie sucks. It thinks it's Tarantino, but it's actually Troy Duffy. It's everything that is wrong with the Boondock Saints is wrong with at least the first 45 minutes of this movie. They are really trying to set a tone that I hate.
Yeah, the tone is obnoxious. And also, once the movie continues, you realize that it's for nothing. Like, that's not actually what the rest of the movie is. It's just like he wanted to be obnoxious in the first act. You'll probably give us some clues to that when you talk about how this was made. But it sounds like that was his explicit goal. It was like, I'm going to put my thumb in the eye of Hollywood and do everything you're not supposed to do and gross people out and shock them. And it's like, all you did was turn off your audience.
He actually says in an interview, he started to write the script and the first thing I did was write a list of every taboo, everything I knew a cowardly executive would refuse to accept from a sympathetic leading man. And I'm not saying every leading man needs to be sympathetic. We've covered movies before that have shitty protagonists, but if you're going to spend 2 hours, and this movie is every fucking minute of 2 hours, give me somebody I can at least tolerate being in their presence for that long, even if I don't necessarily like them. But it was supposed to start with a trailer to another movie starring Parker and Longbow and was to be, quote, shot as slick and hip as possible, but with horrible, unspeakable acts of violence and degradation. He realized it was too extreme during pre-production and cut it out. But yeah, that's some Troy Duffy nonsense if I've ever heard it. And for those that don't know, Troy Duffy is the director and writer of the Boondock Saints.
Check out episode 69. Nice.
That's very Troy Duffy. Like, we're going backwards. You said you watched it in teenage years. I'm thinking high school, but now he's like appealing to middle schoolers. Pure just like, haha, he did something gross. That's so cool.
He cast Ryan Philippe in the lead. Not a terrible actor. I think he's better now than he was then at acting.
Yes.
But like, he's not believable as this kind of tough guy with nothing to lose. Like, he's just too pretty.
I'm wondering if he's believable as the guy from the first couple scenes of the movie.
Oh, yeah.
Because the first couple scenes of the movie, it's a comedy about losers, about obnoxious nincompoops who think they're badass and are actually like humiliated but don't care.
Yeah, they get their ass kicked outside a bar by Sarah Silverman and her boyfriend.
And then the movie transitions into, no, actually, they're super criminals with every skill and knowledge in the book.
They clearly have military training based on the way they engage in gunfights.
Yeah.
They have all these tricks up their sleeves. It feels like two separate movies. And boy, do I hate that first movie. I don't like the second one.
Right. But it's a tolerable, like, action thriller.
Sarah Silverman is just shouting at Ryan Philippe from across a parking lot about how he likes to fuck babies. And then he says, if I'm remembering correctly, shut that cunt's mouth before I start her head.
Yeah.
I don't even know what that means. And I don't care to learn.
It's like, it's supposed to be funny because it's so over the top and edgy and also nonsensical. The things that he says, the things that she says back to him, but none of it's charming. None of it's actually fun. It's all just like, ugh, get me out of here kind of stuff.
It's not charming. It's also not funny, if that's what they're going for. Just saying bad words has never been funny. Profanity can be a punchline if it's used correctly, but like, the movie's just throwing bad words on top of bad words, trying to make something happen. And it just feels very try-hardy and bad. It's covering up bad writing with bad words.
It is. It didn't have a point.
It affects your perception of the main characters.
You think you know what the first scene of the movie is supposed to do when you introduce the main characters, but it does such a poor job of introducing them in favor of paying attention to this gimmick gimmick that it came up with about the shouting match that it fails at everything that it tries to do.
Never mind that they set off a car alarm just by sitting on a car and then just keep sitting on it. That's
part of the thing. If you show your badasses and they're doing something obvious to attract attention and start a fight, then give them some motivation. Show us something that they were trying to accomplish. But because they wanted to give the screaming girlfriend center stage because they thought the lines that they had cooked up were so funny that they forgot to actually show us how the main characters who they're trying to introduce are navigating this world. So there's kind of no point to anything they're doing except to set off this scene that hey, I wrote a scene. Can you guys sit on the Mercedes so we can do the scene I wrote?
Right.
And a lot of the movie feels like the stench of screenwriter is thick in all the scenes.
And then it immediately goes into, and I know we're doing the running through the plot thing, but I don't want to lose this. It immediately goes into a voiceover where Ryan Philippe is explaining how they move through the world and how they operate. And it's like, there is a natural order of things where the good guys always win. And I was like, there's no good guys in this movie. Literally everybody is in on a scheme or playing an angle. The speech means nothing. And also, it's just such a lame cliche way to start your voiceover monologue, which never comes back until the end of the movie.
It's not observant enough to be a true observation, but it's also not crazy enough to be an obviously ironic thing that we're seeing this guy who has a terrible idea about how the world works. It's just milquetoast and in the middle of the road, so it doesn't serve either purpose except to be kind of annoying.
It's incredibly uninspired. It is the monologue you would write in high school for a creative writing thing when you're trying to be edgy because you've been reading too much Bukowski.
Yeah.
Before we get too far into the weeds, we should talk about the making of this movie.
Yeah, tell us about Chris McQuarrie and how this thing happened.
All right. Christopher McQuarrie started his career with an Oscar win. Nominated for writing Bryan Singer's twisty crime thriller The Usual Suspects, the young screenwriter shocked the world by winning for just his second credited movie script. McQuarrie thought he'd now have an easy road to moving into the director's chair as he began shopping his dream project, an epic retelling of the story of Alexander the Great.
Called The Usual Conquests.
But financing was hard to come by for such a big budget movie, and his friend Benicio del Toro, whom he'd worked with in The Usual Suspects, told him his best bet was to make another crime movie to prove his worth. McQuarrie paid his bills by working as a script doctor on movies like Batman and Robin and X-Men until he finally listened to Benicio and wrote a crime movie. He tried to include things he specifically knew movie executives would object to as I'm not sure, protest?
A tantrum?
What he came up with was The Way of the Gun, a thriller about two low-level criminals who take a pregnant woman hostage in order to score a ransom from her wealthy sperm donor, who plans to raise the baby as his own, and he and Del Toro shopped the script around to several high-profile actors who all told them to get fucked.
Get out of here before we start your head.
But Ryan Philippe, fresh off a star-making turn in Cruel Intentions, was wary of becoming a heartthrob and wanted to take on more serious roles, pestering McQuarrie until he got a meeting. I assume he didn't tell him about the silly voice he had cooked up for his character because he got the part. With an $8.5 million budget, McQuarrie rounded out his cast with up-and-comers like Taye Diggs and Nicky Katt, plus proven names like Juliette Lewis, James Caan, and Scott Wilson. Filmed in Utah between September and December of 1999, The Way of the Gun was released on September 8th, 2000, and was a critical and commercial flop.
More like Way of the Bomb, huh?
The movie opened in 9th place, making $2.1 million, and it would drop all the way to 15th in its second week, despite being added to more theaters. By week 3, it was pulling in less than $500,000. Critics gave it bad to mixed reviews, as it currently sits at 45% on Rotten Tomatoes, but McQuarrie has done just fine for himself, and the movie has built a sizable cult following in the years since its release.
That is really interesting to me. I somehow ended up on a YouTube clip of the opening scene, and the person who posted it to YouTube was like, greatest opening scene in movie history. And then there were dozens of comments of people going, fuck yeah, best opening scene ever. And this is the scene that we were just talking about, this incredibly obnoxious parking lot fight that offends and doesn't make sense. And is just like, who are these people that are turning this into a cult favorite?
They are the dudes who have Boondock Saints posters on the wall, Fight Club posters on the wall, but they didn't really understand Fight Club. They still put up the middle finger when they take photos with their family.
Take a picture, yeah.
God, I hope none of them are listeners. If you're a listener, then none of that applies to you and you're great.
No.
But you need to rewatch that opening scene with a more critical eye. And then the rest of the movie, yeah. You first texted me when you were like 15 minutes into the movie and you were like, I know you said you like this movie, but I'm sorry, like I hate it. And then I texted you back when I started watching it and I was like, this is fucking terrible. That opening scene just soured me on this movie to such a degree that I don't think I ever recovered, even though the rest of the movie is at least less obnoxious obnoxious.
To be fair, if anyone knows the content of the scene that we're watching, you can imagine people being offended purely on its content, the excessive, too clever insults that they're hurling at each other. And then for the fact that the heroes are laying their hands on women in this, they punch the girlfriend, he stomps on this other lady that's insulting him. So it's
She
offensive.
just throws a drink at him, I think. Like, they, not only do they throw the first punch, but they throw the first punch at ladies.
So it's offensive for those reasons. And that would be enough reason if anyone watched this was turned off to the movie. But for me, it was more like you did all this stuff that's like horrible and you sucked at introducing your main characters on a technical storytelling basis. It also sucks. So it's like, why did you put me through that if it wasn't even going to be part of anything helpful in the movie?
Well, if you thought that was the worst things could get, it's actually not even the most obnoxious scene in Act 1.
No.
Things get worse. Do you want to start at walking us through the plot so I can hate on my actual least favorite scene from this movie?
I guess I got to do it. Here we go. A pair of friends who refer to themselves as Parker, played by Ryan Philippe, and Longbow, played by Benicio del Toro, are misfits from society, dedicated to a life of crime. One day, they happen to hear about a 9 months pregnant woman named Robin, played by Juliette Lewis, who's acting as a surrogate to a rich man. They decide to kidnap Robin for ransom on her next trip to the doctor. But Robin is protected by a security detail, including 2 bodyguards named Jeffers, played by Taye Diggs, and Obex, played by Nikki Katt. After a shootout at the clinic and a car chase, Parker and Longbow manage to escape with Robin. Heading south, they stop at a gas station and realize Robin is in pain, so they call her OBGYN, Dr. Painter, to come examine her. Painter checks Robin out and says she's just dehydrated, but the baby is due within just a few days. He also informs the kidnappers who the baby's intended father is. It's a man named Hale Chittick, played by Scott Wilson, a big-time frontman and money launderer for lots of shady interests. At the same time, back at his lavish home, Chittick is realizing he's in a tough spot. He really wants his baby, but he can't pay a ransom and he can't go to the cops because either way, he'll run afoul of his dangerous clientele.
Yeah, it's a lot of table setting. They set this table for so long just to give us like one lima bean as our meal. We needed a feast after all this.
And I would say when you strip it down, which I really tried to do in the synopsis to just the key points of the plot, they make a movie that you can understand. Some criminals get wind of a potential heist they can pull and they try it and it turns out a little more complicated than they thought and they find out that they're in deep. That's a fine setup for an action crime movie.
Worked for True Romance.
It's all the details where this movie starts to go under.
It wants to be too many things. It wants to be a Pulp Fiction type intersecting stories, a little bit of mystery. But McQuarrie wrote The Usual Suspects. He wasn't like one of the writers on it. He was the writer. And whatever Bryan Singer did while shooting it, that's still his script. And it's a movie where the twist actually works. Here, he's just throwing twists at the wall to be like, maybe the audience will like one of them. And they're not clear enough to be impactful because I feel like everyone in the audience would be noticing these twists at different times based on how subtle a lot of them are.
That's the problem. The movie is very clever. I think we're going to get into this more in the second act where more or less where most of the big reveals happen. But that's what McQuarrie offers you as the joy, the pleasurable experience of watching this movie is you think this is going on and I'm going to reveal this and I'm going to reveal that and that. And yeah, crime thrillers, they have things like that, revelations where you're like, oh, it's more complicated than I thought. But in this movie, the way they come out, it's too clever and also not smart enough at the same time. It's like throwing all this stuff at you and you're like, do I need to know this? But it's doing such a weak job of it that you're not getting the payoff. You're not going, oh my God, I didn't know that guy was really in this situation. That's crazy. I wonder what's going to happen next. That's what's supposed to be the payoff to a twisty movie. But in this movie, it's like, I think I just learned something, but I don't know why, and takes the fun out.
I'm not 1,000% sure what it is, and also I don't care.
But let's talk about why we're not inclined to care about this movie. We spent a long time on the first scene, and like you teased, the second scene, maybe worse?
Definitely worse. For one thing, it is working counteractive to our heroes' quote-unquote goals, which is to donate sperm because you can get $3,000 for a hit. And if you just look at Ryan Philippe and Benicio del Toro, they're good-looking dudes. They could probably get approved to donate. You know, they both still have their hair, unlike some people. They probably, if they just weren't raging dickheads, would be in and out in 5 minutes. But the intake doctor at the sperm clinic, he just asks Ryan Philippe if he's heterosexual, and that leads to the F slur being thrown around. It's got to be like 25 times.
Yeah.
By Ryan Philippe, who, what point is he trying to make? That LA is full of gay people? We haven't even established that they're in LA.
No, it's like a really weak attempt to do what Tarantino does and what Tarantino is rightly criticized for at times, throwing edgy shit in his dialogue because it like feels real. Now that's how people talk. People have terrible opinions. And my analogy is this scene is to a Quentin Tarantino edgy dialogue scene as Opie and Anthony were to the Howard Stern show.
Yeah.
I don't know how many listeners will get that analogy, but when Howard Stern became popular, a lot of talentless morning show DJs were like, oh, people like it when you're gross and edgy and raunchy.
Man Cow is another one. If you don't know
Yeah.
Opie and Anthony, you might know Man Cow.
So they were all like trying to ape the shocking part of something that they thought people liked, but they missed the point. They had no substance. They had no heart. And that's what this scene is. It's so hollow. And you're just like, I know he's just saying this to try to get a rise out of the audience. And I'm not talking about the character. I'm talking about Christopher McQuarrie. I'm like, it's just gross.
It doesn't help that Ryan Philippe is talking to us in this silly ass voice he decided to do.
Yeah.
We might have to put a quote, like a line from him in this so people can hear how terrible he actually sounds.
I am a fairly intelligent, good-looking man, physically fit.
It's Froggy Marlon Brando, or like Marvin the Martian and Young Brando. It's really bad.
I thought I detected notes of Scarface because it's kind of New Yorky, but it also has a weird thing he's doing in his he's swallowing his tongue.
He doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't know what he's doing. Especially in 1999, he was not a good enough actor to say most of these lines and get away with them. Now you throw a silly voice on top of it. Like, these are bad lines. What does he say? We're not talking about how long you're going to live, hun. We're talking about how slow you're going to die. Like, he sounds.
That was good. You got pretty close that time.
I'm on it, man. Don't fuck with me. My voices are top notch. I got lots of compliments on my Southern accent from last week.
I hope so.
So all three of them.
Baby's hot. I love that one.
Baby's hot, Newt.
I'm trying to learn it. I'm trying to learn an impression of you doing Carrie Russell in Free State.
We're going to have to cover more Southern dramas with hot babies.
just to cue up your chance to say the line. But yeah, Ryan Philippe, I didn't have a lot of opinions about him. And way back in the day when we started this show, we did a little movie called MacGruber. And I'm like, Ryan Philippe rocks. He's so funny in that. I mean, it was 10 years later.
He's great in MacGruber. Yeah, it was about 10 years after.
And I'm like, wow, I actually love this guy. And then I watch this and I'm like, retroactively dislike him now. I had to take it back.
He was also like a good guest on SNL at times. He did the Magical Mysteries music video, which was making fun of the Insane Clown Posse.
Okay.
Really funny sketch. But also, it sounds like he might kind of suck in his personal life, which doesn't help.
Yeah, man, you can't dig too deep on any male actors without finding something ugly underneath the rocks.
I swear to God, if anything like that comes out about Mark Ruffalo, I will be so upset.
That would suck.
Like, I can't see it happening.
I hope he's as pure of heart as he seems.
Who's going to investigate the investigator? It's like, who watches The Watchmen?
It's true. Nobody's obsessed enough to investigate Mark Ruffalo.
Except Mark Ruffalo, and he's not going to do it. Maybe Gyllenhaal could investigate Mark Ruffalo and vice versa.
I'd watch that movie.
So you mentioned that what the movie thinks its joy is viewers reveling in twists. The joy certainly does not come from the performances, because he cast a lot of fun, exciting, different actors. And when I say different actors, like people who don't just read the lines and move on to, like Benicio, Juliette Lewis, even Nikki Katt's like a very kinetic actor. And he gave them all sleeping pills or something before they shot their scenes, because everyone's just like very monotone. James Caan never raises his voice, but that kind of works for his character.
That's a good observation.
Taye Diggs is maybe the only one who gets to like raise his voice like at any point.
He does pretty well. Benicio, I felt part of Benicio's talent is being that kind of quiet but imposing presence.
Definitely, like in Sicario, he mastered that.
I think he was going for that here, but I can see why when he got on set and saw what Ryan Philippe was doing with his part, he was like, oh shit, this guy's going clown party with this. I've got to underplay just to compensate, to provide some balance to this duo that we're playing. So he's dialed way back, which means it's not as fun as it could be if you let Benicio play the dialed up part. But thankfully, there's Juliette Lewis. We meet her a little bit into this, and I'm like, wow, this is the first character that feels like a person, not like a pile of screenwriters' dialogue ideas swept together.
But Juliette Lewis, too, she's like a Lady Benicio in ways. She brings her own special sauce to every role. And a little bit of it comes out in the second act, but in the first act, she's more damsel-y. She's very much in distress.
Yeah.
And very soft-spoken, almost childlike in those early scenes with Chittick.
That's true.
And I was like, this doesn't feel like a Juliette Lewis character. And then by the end, it feels like a Juliette Lewis character, but you're like, we didn't go on a journey with her or anything. She just changed halfway through.
And because she's going into labor by the end, it's like her character doesn't get to do things except have a baby. She can't turn around and become the hero because she's laid up on a bed.
She does get to pull a shotgun on the Dickless Wonders.
Oh, that's true. She does something, but yeah, she's humble and just normal. But like, I was thankful because I needed a normal, real seeming person, and she definitely cut through.
Speaking of real people, Scott Wilson is a real person. He's an actor. R.I.P. Passed away, sadly, in 2018.
Sorry to hear.
He plays Hale Chittick. Do you know who else he played?
No, I don't.
He played Frank Reisner on on Justified, and that is our Justified crossover of the week.
Justified crossover of the week.
God damn.
He was a ex-con who got out of jail and then started robbing banks. He was like 80, obviously.
Nice.
So, go walking into a bank with an oxygen tank. It was pretty funny. He gets caught in the end. And it's one of the most like overtly comedic chase scenes on Justified because the chief deputy, Art Mullen, played by MAGA dickhead Nick Searcy, is like jogging slowly after him because he's also like an old fat guy. So there's these two old guys like power walking away from each other and try and land, and they both just run out of breath and sit down. It was a good scene, but not missing any this week. Can't believe you would do that to me in post-production and not even warn me. You know how many text messages I got about that?
You got text?
2.
It was an honest mistake. I thought it'd be more fun.
But I love that character so much. How could I not recognize him? I know who he was. He was a drug dealer in Kentucky. He could have just been a descendant of the lieutenant.
Of Lieutenant Barber.
Yeah.
Yeah. In case you missed last week's Free State of Jones episode, John is referring to Bill Tangradi, whose name I will now never forget, a character actor.
That's a good name.
It's a good name. He played the dandy lieutenant in Free State of Jones, and John missed a little Justified references. But you know what? That movie had so many Justified dudes.
Yeah.
I didn't expect you to get them all.
Yeah, he wasn't like a one-off character either. He pops up in 4 or 5 episodes in season 5. He's like a recurring dude. But I do say, Mr. Boyd Crowder, I will sell your heroin for a small fee. If he was still doing the voice in Justified, that's how it would have went down.
That's absolutely how it would have went.
We didn't talk about the kidnapping yet, the actual
Yeah.
big action piece of the first act.
Got to bring it up. It's not great.
It's not. It's weird. They're walking down this comically long hallway, and Ryan Philippe is just walking towards them with a stocking on his face. I know that he's the diversion, and you want them to pay attention to him because Benicio is like sneaking around. But Benicio also just walks in front of them reading a newspaper. If I was like a highly trained bodyguard who seems to probably have some kind of military background, I'd probably notice the weird guy holding a newspaper up to his face while walking. Like it's all very clumsy.
All the tradecraft or the criminal and bodyguard spycraft kind of stuff in this scene feels slightly off. Like it's all kind of quirky the way they like set them up. Then they do this elaborate thing where they just back out of the room in an almost cartoonish way when they're basically leave the kidnapping empty-handed for no particular reason except that one of the guys points a gun at her belly and they're like, oh no, I guess you win the confrontation, but don't shoot us. We're going to back out. Then they do this whole like SWAT team commando squad calling out moving, and they cover and maneuver their way back out of the building.
The moving thing is funny because they yell out like moving and then just turn their back on these gunmen and run away, but like 10 feet and then stop and hide behind a pillar and turn around and like moving. It very much feels like a children's game like you would play on the playground.
It does.
And also like you saw them coming. You must have assumed they had guns. Like why do you decide to back out just because they point the guns places? Like you kind of had to have a sense of how this was going to go down.
It feels like McQuarrie knew that he needed them to lose the encounter because the whole thing pivots.
Because why?
Well, because the pregnant woman has to surprise everybody.
Oh, yeah.
She has to be the decisive factor that instead of hiding when they try to secure her away, she comes back out and gets herself kidnapped. That's the turning point. But you need a better reason why they gave ground in the first encounter. So here's where the movie pivots. Which kind of movie it is pivots just after that scene. So you could say, well, I've watched 2 scenes of this movie so far before this one. First scene, they're nincompoops. They fuck around and piss off people in a nightclub parking lot and get their asses beaten for being jerks and stupid. And they laugh about it. So they don't mind being humiliated as dum-dums. And then the second scene, they're despicable people. They're gross and bigoted and also kind of dumb. And then the third scene, you're like, oh, it's the same thing. It's a comedy where they thought they staged this great kidnapping, but now they're backing out of it like in Bugs Bunny style doing dumb stuff. Except the moment they go out that door, the movie goes, oh no, actually, they're really good at this. They outshoot the rest of the security team, and then they proceed to also outshoot Jefferson Obex. They win the confrontation and they leave with the girl. And after that, they're pretty much the most badass criminals you ever met. And it's a head shaker. Like, why did the movie change who they are?
Oh, because it's a bad movie and it's poorly written.
Thank you. I was wondering about that.
But something just struck me when we were talking about this kidnapping scene. So spoiler alert, we learn that, I guess we haven't even met James Caan yet, but we meet a fixer / bagman named Joe Sarno in the next section. Spoiler alert, he ends up being Robin's dad.
Sorry, we spoiled the movie.
And he says to Benicio in a scene that they have, which is probably the best scene in the movie, I don't have anything put away, but my daughter's working on something that's going to help me retire. You assume he's talking about the 15 million, but like, how did she know that someone was going to try to kidnap her to put this whole plan in motion?
Oh, I know what you're saying. I think he was talking about the 1 million that she was getting.
Just that she was going to get for...
She's supposed to get $1 million for being the surrogate mom.
I'm sorry, they both can't live off $1 million. Like, she's young.
This was the year 2000. A dollar went a lot further back in the day. I don't know.
I guess.
But yes, all this stuff is mysterious and it's really hard to figure out in real time when you watch the movie forwards and only one time through. A lot of the stuff doesn't add up, which you can go back and make it add up later.
Did you watch it backwards the second time?
Yeah, I had to watch it in reverse. just to make sense of it.
Do they say anything like demonic, like the Black Sabbath record?
It says "Hail to my sweet Satan" over and over, which I thought was weird.
Oh, cool.
But you don't understand why she has a change of heart in the elevator, doesn't go up and hide in the office, but lets herself get kidnapped. And just like many of the reveals and twists in this movie, by the time you learn, you can't connect it because you didn't bother to care about it when it happened because it didn't make any sense.
Right.
So you wrote it off. And then, the reveal, McQuarrie thinks it's so powerful when you connect these things. But most people, I don't think, are connecting these things because it took me 2 full watches till I figured out why she walks into the kidnapping. And it's because, spoiler alert, we're spoiling more of the amazing reveals of this movie early, but it's her baby. It's not Chittick's and his young wife's baby. It's her baby. She wants to get out of the deal because she's like, hey, I'm going to be a mom and it's my baby. Why do I have to give it up?
It's her baby with her OBGYN, Dr. Painter, who also happens to be Chittick's son. I don't know why his last name's not Chittick, though. That's weird.
No, something probably happened in Baltimore that made him change his name. But
Baltimore, you say?
Yeah, it's just a feeling I have about Baltimore. Anyway, we're like way ahead on the plot here. Did we miss anything we want to talk about in Act 1?
If we did, who fucking cares? You ready for me to go through the second act?
Yeah, let's hear what happened next.
All right, so to help recover his unborn baby... No, I'm not going to read it like that. To help recover his unborn baby, Mr. Chittick brings in his old friend, fixer, and bagman, Joe Sarno, played by James Caan. Sarno immediately has friction with Chittick's younger security team, Jeffers and Obex. A little later, one of the kidnappers, Longbow, calls from Mexico with their demand. $15 million brought to a motel by the doctor, who will then induce labor. While Chittick and company deal with this, we learn several new wrinkles to the story. 1. Dr. Painter is Chittick's son. 2. Chittick's young wife Francesca is having an affair with the bodyguard Jeffers. 3. Jeffers and Obex are scheming to kill the pregnant mother Robin and keep the ransom money for themselves. And 4. Sarno is Robin's dad. Probably. Meanwhile, in Mexico, Sarno has already arrived at the motel, and he strikes up conversation with Longbow. Sarno offers him $1 million right there to leave the girl and walk away, but it's not enough, so they part ways. Back in the motel room, Robin reveals to the kidnappers that the baby is actually hers. The embryo from Chittick and Francesca didn't take, so she and Dr. Painter made a baby the old-fashioned way, with sex. Shortly thereafter, Parker has a moment of doubt and talks to his buddy Longbow about packing it in. Robin uses this opportunity to grab a shotgun and call the police. The Mexican cops and Chittick's various henchmen all arrive in the motel parking lot at once, and a massive gunfight ensues. Amidst the chaos, Jeffers manages to drive off with Robin and Dr. Painter. Parker and Longbow torture the wounded Obex to find out where Jeffers is headed and take off in pursuit.
A lot of reveals.
A lot of reveals.
Maybe the startling dramatic effect was not as strong as it could be on our audience because we teased some of those.
We did. I don't think it would have hit the same when I just read a synopsis of the various twists as well.
A list of twists. But that's what it feels like in the movie. It feels like the movie is just reading off twists to you. And you're like, okay, I get it. I see that's his son. And like some of them are obvious. Like when Jeffers and Obex come up with this scheme to kill the pregnant mother, that one's kind of consequential. You're like, okay, I see that the movie is setting them to go down and negotiate this hostage transfer. And whoa, they're actually planning to kill everybody. What's going to happen? That's the kind of twist that complicates the movie in a way that you go, oh my gosh, I wonder what's going to happen. But all of these aren't bad, but some of them aren't even sure. That's why we're like, Sarno's Robin's dad.
Yeah.
No one says it, but there's all these hints. And if you add them up, it's obviously true. Kind of just...
They have like a moment at the very end of the movie that kind of, if you were still on the fence, you're like, all right, like he very tenderly holds her hand.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I don't think they ever come out and say it. It's a strange choice.
It's a weird choice. Jeffers is getting close at first. When he first meets Sarno, he's like, oh, you're mad because you're the one who picked the girl to be the surrogate and now it's getting fucked up. So he's like, gets it half right. And then later there's a point where they make him sit on the steps and go, why did Chittick say Sarno has a conflict of interest here? And it's like, the girl? And I think McQuarrie thinks that we're all putting it together and go, he's the dad. And maybe we are. I didn't put it together till later. And even when I did, I'm like, this is a wild guess, but I think Sarno's her dad.
It's real clunky. Like parents and children usually have the same names. Not all the time, but
no.
Dads and children usually do.
Did we ever hear Robin's last name? I can't remember. She doesn't mention an ex-husband or anything.
On the cast list.
You never know.
Actually, there's really not that many people that have like Jeffers and Obex. You assume those are their last names.
Sure.
Parker, Longbow, Robin. And then it's just Joe Sarno. He's the only guy who gets two names besides Hale Chittick, which is a weird name. It's not a very movie-ish name.
It's not fun to try to say it.
No, it sounds like we're bowing to an alien bug lord named Chittick.
Hale Chittick.
But yeah, Caan's he's not Sonny Corleone anymore, but he's also not Elf James Caan yet. Like he's in the in-between time.
I hear you struggling to say he's good in this.
No, No, you know what? He's good, but he's just not exciting. Then again, he almost plays it as like he's kind of bored with all this. Like he's a little bit above it, which is a weird choice when it's your daughter that's at risk.
Yeah.
You know, if he was just like a bag man, like the movie keeps calling him, then sure, like he goes through it kind of blasé. He never really seems too worried. But if that's your daughter and you're in a motel and she's 20 feet away and you could go save her and you just don't seem to give a shit.
Yeah, it's weird that they didn't play that. And I kind of blame the script and not James Caan for that. That should have been a tortured character, right?
Yeah.
As much as on his surface, he's the cold, jaded fixer who's been doing this forever. And when he confronts Longbow, he's coldly intimidating. He's like, kid, this is how things work. You better learn how things go. And he's good at that. Like, I like that part of him. But they don't really ever show him freaking out about his daughter or even not freaking out on purpose. That part is so underplayed because McQuarrie, I think, doesn't know whether he's ready to reveal it or not. And I'm like, man, you should have revealed it. You should have made it super clear. And you should have made it the dilemma for this character, who's one of the most likable characters because you got fucking James Caan in your movie. Let him live out a dilemma on screen.
Let him cook. Let my man cook. They take away all his pots and pans and he has no hot plate at all, not even a microwave.
No.
But his scene with Benicio is a lot of fun. Benicio's the older of his team. He's probably closer in age to Caan than he is to Philippe, honestly. They're just like trading old stories. And, you know, Chris McQuarrie writes a lot of scripts that I've never thought were bad. And I feel like here's where I start seeing his skill as a writer come out. There's some good lines in this. I think my favorite line in the movie is when Sarno asks Longbow if he's the brains of the operation. And he goes, to be honest, I don't think this is a brains kind of operation.
That was good. That was Benicio's best line in the whole movie. Sarno gets some good lines, but I gotta say that scene, they agree to go into the coffee shop by the motel and then they start bonding. And there's some good lines thrown in it and he gives Caan some of the good ones. But in the middle of it, it goes really bad again. So McQuarrie, you can see where like he gets off some good ones, but then the meat of their conversation when they come back to them and they're like bonding, they're talking about how cops are dumb. It's trying to be a nerd out convo where they're inside a certain milieu of a world and they all have their strong opinions about cops. Cops are like this. Cops keep saying things like this and criminals be like this. And it's so cheesy. That part to me was so cheesy and dumb. It undid most of the goodwill.
White people talk on the phone like this. It's like a 90s stand-up.
It's one of those, but you can see it's trying to be a Tarantino thing. He loves to have characters who are intensely passionate about some little micro thing and give you some deep opinions on it and argue about it in the midst of his movie. And that's what this is trying to be. But he doesn't know how to do that with cops and criminals because the things that they say that are supposed to be the cool insider opinions are dopey nothing. Like it falls apart.
Yeah, Chris McQuarrie is a fucking white dude from Princeton. You know,
Okay.
like he's not part of that world and nor should he be.
No.
But like you can't write from the inside, from the outside.
It seems like he didn't do the work. He tried to do a cheap, quick imitation of something with this.
Do they also drop hints that Sarno used to be a cop?
Yeah, they do. There's a couple hints. Jeffers goes like, I love the old time cop lingo.
He reeks of cop on his 20-year pension.
Totally.
Then there's and then so right after this, Sarno starts getting the old gang back together, and I do mean the old gang because he's got a squad of septuagenarians ready to go to war. He calls up his buddy Abner.
Abner.
Is that the dude from Heaven's Gate?
That's Trapper Fred in Heaven's Gate.
AKA the old prospector from the Will Ferrell sketch on SNL. Oh, biscuits and cinnamon. No, he's playing the strangest game of Russian roulette I've ever seen. He puts a bunch of revolvers in a bag and just twists the bag. I was like, it's not gonna, they all look different.
Yeah.
What is that doing for you?
It's establishing that this old guy is suicidal. It's played by Jeffrey. Did we say it's Jeffrey Lewis? That's who's
No, we didn't say the
the actor
name.
who plays Abner and also Trapper Fred. So like he's a familiar face. If you see Jeffrey Lewis, you're like, I know that guy. A great character actor. And yeah, you give him this really weird bit of business. He puts one bullet in each of 6 or 8 revolvers and he puts them in a pillowcase and then he reaches into the pillowcase blindly.
What's the fucking point of that?
I don't know.
Is he gonna go through all of them?
He actually pulls the trigger on one of them and then he's about to on the second one when he decides to answer the phone. Classic screenwriting move.
And then you get the line, are you busy? No, not at all. This
Yeah.
like kind of fake chipperness from him is interesting.
It's an underbaked character.
It's something. He's trying to do something.
And Jeffrey Lewis is so likable on screen that, yeah, you can take a character that has almost nothing to do and you still enjoy watching him. But we have a little tidbit about Jeffrey Lewis.
Chris McQuarrie couldn't stop putting twists even in like the casting of this movie.
Even in real life. You thought you figured out that Joe Sarno is the Juliette Lewis character's dad. Guess what Jeffrey Lewis is? He's a real dad.
He's Juliette Lewis's real dad. And also Scott Wilson, who plays Chittick, is Taye Diggs' real dad.
I would have not guessed that.
No, obviously that's not true. But he's great. We love Jeffrey Lewis. We liked him as Trapper Fred. What is there to complain about?
Yeah, he livens up
His
in the
death
movie.
scene is hilarious, but that's in the third act, so we'll get to that later, right?
Yeah, that's not so close to the end.
I'd like to be alone now. So matter of fact.
He's good. It's a point where the movie snaps back into its original sort of comedy-esque mode. So even though he's good and it's hilarious, I felt like it was out of place.
Yes, it definitely feels like I wasn't sure if it was intentionally hilarious or if that was just
Yeah, you're not ready
me
for
being
it.
a nihilist.
Because the movie's gone into full-on shootouts and torture scenes. And you're like, oh
Yeah.
no, we're going back to the silliness now.
The third act of this movie is essentially just shootouts and torture scenes. So let's talk about Baltimore. We should just talk about what happened in Baltimore.
Things changed. After Baltimore, everything is different now.
I went to Baltimore to find out who I was, and I found out who I'm not in Baltimore. All right, they're doing a Pilsen, everybody. This is a new category called doing a Pilsen, where you just say a location's name over and over and over again because you can't write your way around it. Apparently, something bad happened in Baltimore with Dr. Painter,
Yes.
and him and his dad talk about it in very cryptic terms, like me and Ian just did. I would dare to say our dialogue was ad-libbed and better than what was on the page, but
Yeah.
it's fucking annoying and so unnecessary.
And it's
And
another...
we never find out what happened.
That's the thing, is I think it's supposed to be another meaningful reveal that creates dramatic irony later in the movie, but I could only squeeze that out of the movie by watching it backwards and forwards 3 times. There's parts of their conversation where it's like the dad bailed out the kid, and there's something about a residency and failing to deliver, and you don't know if that's deliver in a sort of generic sense or in an OBGYN sense.
He is an OBGYN, or at least was training to be one.
Yeah, so my fan theory on what that whole nonsense talk was about was that this is a kid who was in his residency, came out of perhaps Johns Hopkins University, famous medical school in Baltimore, and bombed out when he tried to deliver a baby and something terrible went wrong, and his dad had to pay off the malpractice suit or something, and now he's incapable of delivering babies. And
How bad could a delivery go to, like,
well, I don't know.
what happened? Like, just like a foot came out or something, like a fully grown adult foot, and you're like, oh no, how did I miss this?
Something terrible happened. Something tragic happened. His dad bailed him out, and now he's kind of a phony doctor. His dad is propping him up and using him with a surrogate mom. And then in the end, he's forced to actually deliver a baby in the worst conditions possible. And yes, that would be incredibly ironic and
Mexican horror house.
yeah, that would be super dramatic if you knew that was in fact what he was struggling with internally, but you're never sure.
Yeah, it's bad. It's obnoxious. Every time they say the word Baltimore, I want to punch my screen.
Yeah,
The only thing that would save this storyline is if we found out that he was behind the Key Bridge collapse.
that would be a dramatic reveal.
He was training to be a ship captain, and his first big job was driving a cargo ship.
He was the ship's OBGYN,
The captain was giving birth, and he couldn't get his baby delivered in time.
steered it sideways. Yeah, that's a big fuck up.
Tragedy happened. Not to make light of the Key Bridge collapse. It's a
No,
very
real tragedy happened there.
fucked up situation. Yeah.
Our hearts go out to the people of Baltimore. But speaking of smaller tragedies, how about Brian Phillippe's monologue at the end of this second act?
It's an extension of what I was saying with the monologue he gives in the voiceover right after the opening scene, the natural order of things. It's just such surface level nonsense, but it's worse now because he's actually saying it out loud to another person and not just thinking it.
Right. It's bad in every way I could find. First of all, he's not helped by the writing. He tells this story that supposedly changed him as a criminal. Like, in all these years, I've been killing people for fun and profit.
All these years, I've been killing people. Sorry.
He tells the story of one that almost broke him. And it's this weird story. And he admits it. It's like the most obvious time he was asked to kill this child molester by this DA who said, I'll let you off your charges if you kill the guy who's molesting my son. And I'm like, okay, no brainer. And he's recounting the story. And he's like, I was about to kill him. And I was so excited because I was so righteous. And then he started praying. And I'm like, okay, I didn't think a prayer would really change you all that much. But what did he say? And he's like, he started saying, now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. And like, it's the children's bedtime prayer is what rocked your world.
It's like the bedtime, the only one.
It's like the most inane little thing. And that rocked his world. He was done. He was like, I questioned my whole identity.
Couldn't believe it because he was laying himself down to sleep, just like the prayer said.
Just like in the prayer. And then he makes it worse. He's like, and to this day, I can't sleep without saying that prayer.
Why?
And it's like, is this supposed to be funny? That is the stupidest thing.
I'll never forget. I went to see my son at school and he was standing up and he was saying this thing. He was like, I pledge allegiance to the flag. And now I can't go to a baseball game without
Without pledging my allegiance lines.
Oh, who fucking cares, man? Like,
I'm a changed man. And then the directing, let me just use this as a hook to talk about the bad directing, which I don't want to let McQuarrie off the hook for simply doing bad writing in this movie.
let's not let him off the hook for anything.
The blocking of the characters and the lighting in this movie is so flat and boring for so many key dialogue scenes. 4 people, 2 people, however many people are in the scene, they will walk into a room and stand across from each other in a straight line and stand stock still and say lines. And it's so stiff. And I get it. He's a new director. Maybe he just didn't have that much vision for how to block actors and keep the energy flowing in a scene. I was noticing it throughout the movie, and I'm not even like much of a filmmaking buff that I often notice those differences, but it was like jarring to me. And then for most of this scene, which is like the emotional breakdown moment of the main character, he's looking straight to the right, like 90 degrees right, hard profile. He's looking at the door of a van and he's delivering his biggest lines to that. And like once in a while, he cheats out to Benicio and says a little line and, does a hard swallow to show that he's really about to cry. But it's just like dumb in so many ways.
Yeah, I feel like it's way more often that we call out flashy directing because it's more noticeable. If we're calling out mundane directing, it has to be like really fucking mundane.
It's really bad. And like the lighting is flat. Everything just looks way worse than it needs to be. Anyway, I'm exhausted from being a hater in this second act. Do you think we're going to get through the third act without passing out?
I think the third act is also hate worthy, but it's got some stuff that's like fun to hate on, like the James Caan carnival game we're going to play.
That's true. And like you said, it's more shootout action and less bad dialogue.
It's almost entirely a shootout, but yeah, why don't you walk us through it so we can talk about it?
Here we go. Jeffers has taken Robin to a dusty old brothel in the Mexican countryside. There, he orders Dr. Painter to perform a C-section at gunpoint. As Painter struggles to deliver the baby, Parker and Longbow arrive and shoot up the brothel with heavy weapons, but they fail to hit Jeffers. So to resolve the armed standoff, Dr. Painter whips out a hidden pistol, and he kills Jeffers with a shot to the neck. Meanwhile, outside, Sarno and a bunch of his elderly associates arrive with the $15 million ransom money in duffel bags. They pile the cash in the courtyard and head inside. Parker and Longbow decide to leave Robin be, but they can't help but try to get the money on their way out. So they have an extended firefight with Sarno and his men. They manage to kill every one of Sarno's men, but Sarno survives, and both Parker and Longbow are gravely wounded. With the kidnappers now disabled, Sarno calls a waiting ambulance, and the old bagman is extricated from the brothel, along with his daughter, her baby daddy, his newborn grandson, and all the money. He leaves Parker and Longbow to die in the dirt. Sometime later, Francesca Chittick informs her husband Hale that she's pregnant.
That last reveal is going to be, let's say, a short-lived joy that Chittick is feeling. Much as I like to joke, Taye Diggs is not actually his son.
No.
And I feel like it's going to be pretty obvious that the baby's not his pretty early on.
It's just like a kind of funny zinger that he tacked on there. So it'll be like ironic. After all that he went through to get this one baby with false parentage, there's a whole nother scenario setting up at the end of the movie. I think that's the point of it.
But Jeffers is dead already, so who's he going to get revenge on? We assume that's Jeffers' baby.
Right.
Because
they were definitely lovers, and she actually tells him early on, I want to have your baby.
Look at Taye Diggs and look at Scott Wilson. Whose baby would you rather have?
I thought you were going to say it's short-lived joy for Chittick because he's about to be killed, because what I realized on second watch of this movie, another one of the consequences that they don't quite make clear, but for most of the movie, he's saying, I can't pay a ransom because all my clients will find out and they'll kill me because they'll be like, where'd you get this money, or whose money are you using, or what?
Oh, right.
Some not quite clear reason. So I realized at the time that he sends Sarno off with the bags of cash, it's like he's surrendering himself. He's like, the baby is actually more important than my life. I know that I'm signing my death warrant by sending the money. But then that whole thing turns into nothing because I think Sarno makes off with the money for him and his daughter and his family, right? Is he bringing it back to Chittick?
No, I don't think he's bringing it back to Chittick. What I want to know is, why did Sarno bring the money at all if he was just going to bring a bunch of guys to kill them anyway? Like, you clearly had no intention of a peaceful handoff.
No, but as the movie makes clear, he is a bagman. They are bagmen, so they needed bags. Like, they can't do shit without a bag.
I love how fucking old these guys are. Like, they're so old. They're so old. It's like a movie you would make as like a comedy about old rundown ex-cons getting back together for, like, that's another movie happening that I would rather watch.
Yeah.
Like getting the gang back together for one last job. And I do mean last, because if they don't die in the gunfight, they're going to die of cirrhosis of the liver any day.
It's a rich concept, and they bring it in with no fanfare. You don't see it coming. It's not set up. It's not queued up. It's just the truck pulls up and you're like, who are all these old guys? Oh, that's Sarno. Those must be his buddies. Like, he never...
Is there a bridge tournament like happening in this Mexican brothel?
It's great. You're right. It's a charming concept, but they don't get to have any personalities. All they do is form this shooting gallery ambush.
Yeah, only Abner gets the personality.
Yeah, Abner was the one who gets introduced earlier on. And you're like, oh, I didn't realize. But yeah, of course, he has 7 other buddies, just like Abner, just like old dudes ready to throw down.
Which is another thing that makes me think he was definitely an ex-cop. They all look like ex-cops.
They do. But what's weird is by the end of the movie, his entire Gentleman's Bridge Club is lying dead around him. And he forgets to be sad about that. Like,
yeah, he's got $15 million and his grandson, his daughter's alive. He's all right.
He's got things to be grateful for, but there was a lack of sympathy for the old boys. They were just there to take a bullet.
Important question. Did you already have this note when I texted you about the Joe Sarno Disneyland shooting gallery?
Yes, I made my own. We both observed the same hilarious way the shootout plays out for Sarno.
James Caan, Joe Sarno, is inside the brothel next to a shuttered window while Parker and Longbow are in the courtyard, which the window overlooks, just absolutely massacring his entire squad. And every 4 or 5 minutes, he'll just fling the window open. Not fling, actually. He opens it very slowly and aims his gun so slowly. And then one of them always notices and just turns and start like blowing him up. And he just backs away from the window and then does it again in a few minutes.
Lets the shutter close.
And you observed he looks like he's moving like the Michael Keaton Batman, where he has to move his entire body to move his head. So he might have had some kind of like back surgery, spinal surgery before this. But like James Caan is clearly in no condition to be filming a shootout. So they were like, how can we keep him in the action? But just barely.
Yeah, he's not going to be diving through windows and jumping over walls, all the stuff that the other old guys are doing. So yeah, he's just like the bonus point character in the Disneyland shooting gallery. Every 30 seconds, the shutter swings open and they're like, oh, shutter, shoot the shutter guy.
A little clown pops out on a plank, says something funny, and then falls back.
And there's other funny shooting that goes on. One of the old bagmen gets shotgunned right in the crotch and he goes, ooh, and it's funny.
Right in the dick.
Cool kill.
Cool kills.
Big red splatter in his crotch. It's terrible, but the way the movie did it, it was comic.
You play in dirt, you get dirty. If you don't want to get shot in the dick, don't shoot at people who have guns aimed at your dick.
It's a little lesson.
It's a life lesson for you there. And the shootout goes on for a little too long. It got numbing, but it's not bad. McQuarrie's certainly made his bones as an action director since this, but it's a bit much. Not like it's too violent. It just goes on a little too long.
It's a lot. We should mention our main heroes call themselves Parker and Longbow. That's ostensibly not their real names, and they call themselves that for a reason, and that's that those are the real life last names of real life Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Which one is which?
I think Sundance is Longbow.
Sundance Longbow. Yeah, that was his real name. I just Googled it. And Parker Kid was the other one.
Okay.
No, I'm making shit up.
I go with it. You're the authority on this show. But so it's like a tribute inside a tribute. The characters envision themselves as these classic American outlaw heroes. But McQuarrie's also envisioning himself as a classic American outlaw movie filmmaker. So he has to have a hopeless, fatal ambush shootout. He's putting his Parker and Longbow in the shootout that Butch and Sundance have, but isn't shown in the famous movie of the same name, right? They go out blazing, and that movie ends on the freeze frame. If I recall correctly, this movie, he's like, I'm going to show it and it's going to be more fun.
Right.
That's my psychoanalysis of what McQuarrie thinks he's doing in that final scene.
That makes sense. The naming kind of clues you in on their fate early on, but fucking cares.
That's the problem with this movie. It never really makes you care.
No.
It had a lot of components. You can see a lot of the skill in McQuarrie's writing where he created this cast of characters that has this interesting set of relationships if you can figure them out by the end and take meaning from the situation that it creates. But he didn't do a good job at executing it.
That's all I got. You got anything else?
No, I think we're all shot out.
Let's see what McQuarrie's been up to since this. He's ostensibly Tom Cruise's babysitter. I don't know what you really call him anymore. Does he direct movies or does Tom Cruise direct movies that he just happens to be on set for? Hard to say.
Interesting marriage of convenience kind of situation with those two.
He's actually never directed another movie after this one that didn't star Tom Cruise, which is kind of crazy.
Oh, yeah, I didn't realize that.
So he's directed Jack Reacher, the last 2 Mission Impossible movies, plus the upcoming 8th Mission Impossible movie, which will no longer be called Dead Reckoning Part 2. They're just leaving Dead Reckoning as its own movie. They seem to think that hurt the box office of Dead Reckoning Part 1, like making it a Part 1.
And it was just too many words.
It's a bit wordy. And he's also making a SpaceX movie with Tom Cruise. God help me.
Oh, Lord.
Fuck that. But he's also written Valkyrie, which reunited him with Singer.
Okay.
And I think is how he met Tom Cruise, because Valkyrie predates the Jack Reacher movies. Jack the Giant Slayer, which I think, was that animated? I have no idea. I don't care. The Mummy, which we just covered. He was one of the many writers on The Mummy.
Oh, right.
Cruise obviously brought him on. And Top Gun Maverick. Decent resume. I like the newer Mission Impossible movies. I like the Jack Reacher movie too, as long as you don't know anything about Jack Reacher, the character, because Tom Cruise doesn't quite resemble him at all.
Yeah, but the secret's out now that they did the TV show with an actual gigantic Jack Reacher the way he's written. But at the time,
a massive person.
You wouldn't know. You wouldn't know at the time. And it was fun. Cruise is good at playing those same emotions that Jack Reacher has of, I don't know what you call it.
He's very aloof. He's got a code. I love Alan. Like every time Alan Richardson gives an interview, I'm just like, man, I love this guy.
He's fun.
He's moving up my list. He's going to die like any day now, though. He's old and he's on so many steroids.
Oh, shit.
You don't get to be that size without being on a bajillion
Okay.
there's just no way. If you look at season 1 of Reacher, he was already a huge person, and then you look at season 2 and his head is like 5 sizes bigger.
That's always the key when the head starts growing.
Yeah, it's the growth hormone. Not to almost every actor that has their shirt off at some point is on steroids because they're insecure by nature. But the amount he must be taking to get that size is absurd.
Yeah.
I don't want him to die because I love him.
Hollywood's muscle standards are destructive.
We used to have action stars that looked like Bruce Willis. Not that he was like out of shape, but he looked like a cop.
Our action stars used to look like Hugh Jackman in the first X-Men movie, and now they look like Hugh Jackman today.
It's normal that he's 24 years older and has 15% less body fat. That's totally cool and normal and not going to lead to all these actors dying in their late 50s, which I think Hugh Jackman already is. Or at least he's in his 50s.
Oh, I thought you were going to say already is dying. I was getting scared there.
No, God willing, he's not. He seems very pleasant.
Knocking on wood.
I don't need to catch anyone up on what Benicio's been up to. Like, we talk about him all the time.
Yeah.
He's in a lot of movies we cover. But Philippe, this was just 1 year after his star-making turn in Cruel Intentions. That's the one where he tries to fuck his stepsister.
Oh.
That's the crux of the movie.
That's a Cruel Intention. I didn't know that was what it was.
It is Sarah Michelle Gellar. That helps. Also had Selma Blair in that one, which, by the way, she's crazy now. Don't Google anything about Selma Blair.
Oh, Lordy.
She's crazy. Allegedly.
You're frightening me.
But then, so he also had 1997's I Know What You Did Last Summer was a breakout for him, but that was an ensemble.
Right.
Yeah. I assume he dies in it because he's not in the sequel. I haven't seen the original in forever.
Okay.
He's been working steadily, but he has lost his leading man status. He had some big bombs like right after this one, Antitrust, The Eye Inside. Then he started appearing in more ensembles. Like he was in Crash, the one that won the Oscar for Best Picture, not the one David Cronenberg made about people who like to fuck car crash victims.
Neither one of which I want to watch.
Right. He was in Flags of Our Fathers, and he got some good press for his performance in that. And then, of course, he had a great turn to comedy with MacGruber.
Yeah.
And he returned as Dixon Piper for the show. And he's done other TV work since then. He was in Shooter. He took over for Mark Wahlberg as the titular shooter.
Okay.
I think his character's name was like Ricky Lee Swagger or something ridiculous. It doesn't fit Ryan Phillippe at all.
I like that name, though. I want to be called Ricky Lee Swagger.
I'll call you that. I don't care.
Okay.
Remind me before every episode and all. Big Sky, which got good reviews. I never watched it. I think it was like a twisty drama. And the upcoming Motorheads, where he will be playing Lemmy. No, it has nothing to do with the band
you
Motorhead.
scared me. You tricked me.
Can you imagine? Who should play Lemmy?
That's a fun casting.
Because there's going to be a Motorhead movie. I'm writing it actually currently.
I think you'll do a fine job.
My favorite bass player is actually this American kid named Drake.
It's all about how Lemmy secretly praised you in private for years and years.
In private, always, though. He would never say it in public for some reason. Let's get Brendan Fraser out there as Lemmy. No, I have no idea.
Ooh.
Tune in next week. I'm going to think about this, and we'll
Okay.
have to catch up next week to see who we land on.
Little movie development project for us.
Did you have anything additional you want to add, or should I get to next week's movie?
Let's hear what's next. I'm ready to move out of the way of the gun, as they say.
We're moving out of the way of the gun and up into the sky because we got jetpacks. We're doing the Rocketeer. It's a
Okay.
heavily requested one. People have been asking us for the Rocketeer.
Is it? Okay.
You seem a little skeptical.
No, I'm wide open to the Rocketeer. I think I've seen part of the Rocketeer, but I might have just seen part of Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow because those movies are merged in my head for some reason.
The Rocketeer is better and came first.
Okay. Are they both a little bit steampunky,
Yes.
quirky, alternate future?
Absolutely.
So I'm not crazy.
And they've got a pretty special Justified crossover.
that.
Also, Jennifer Connelly in The Rocketeer has got to be in the running for the best anyone's ever looked in human history.
Ooh.
Yeah. I know I've said Anna de Armas in War Dogs is the front runner, but I haven't watched The Rocketeer in a few years. So
It'll be nice
refresher.
to have Jennifer Connelly back into the blast zone. Dark City was the last one.
Indeed. Dark City. So that wraps us up for this week. Thank you to my co-host, Ricky Lee Swagger.
You got it.
Follow us on Twitter at BlastZonePod. Shoot us an email, blastzonepod@gmail.com if you have any feedback, movie suggestions, just want to chat about movies. Maybe we'll do another mailbag episode soon. That'd be fun.
Send in your questions. Get in the mailbag.
If you start sending in questions, we'll do a mailbag soon. And that wraps us up. So we'll see you next time in the Blast Zone.
See you next time in the blast zone.
Ricky Lee Swagger.